Welcome into the Sportsmemo podcast, the Tuesday edition, the NHL edition with our NHL expert, Andrew McInnis. McInnis, welcome into the pod. How are you?
Hey, Drew. It's great to be here for another week of talking hockey with you. I always enjoy being here. And yeah, it's a great time to be a sports fan right now. We are just approaching that 1 month mark here in the NHL season. Still a very young season, but a lot of teams overachieving in my eyes, a lot of teams underachieving. Overall, a great season so far, and looking forward to diving into this podcast with you. How are you?
I'm doing good, man, and excited to get your thoughts here on the NHL. I've been following you on the best bets, kind of betting it live the last couple podcasts, so 2-1 on those. We'll have a best bet at the end of the podcast. You're 56% in the NHL year-to-date, 59% on totals, and you passed the 90 release mark here, so 52-41 on the year. Just a month into the season now, like you mentioned. What are your overall thoughts on kind of the standings and how the season has progressed to this point?
Well, I'll tell you, Drew, I mean, there's been a lot of shockers so far and been a lot of, things that we've expected. But a lot of teams struggling on the road early on. I think early road trips are a big deal to see which teams can excel on the road and which teams, of course, perform at home as well. And, certain teams we got to look at, like the New York Islanders, a team that, couldn't struggle to really keep a team under 4 goals last season. And this is a team that's really stepped things up defensively. They're at the top of the Metropolitan Division, sitting ahead of the Pittsburgh Penguins and the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Washington Capitals. So got to really be impressed with that. Also got to mention the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks sitting at the top of the Pacific Division. Lots of credit goes towards them. And of course, in the Eastern Conference, got to mention the Tampa Bay Lightning, a team that's always talked about to be up there, but they've been purely dominant so far this year, Drew. 10-3 record with 50 goals for. So, a lot of teams impressing me, but a lot of teams, of course, underachieving, like the New Jersey Devils. They're second last in the Metropolitan Division. And, I can guarantee you, Drew, a month from now, we're having this conversation. That Devils team will be right up there in the mix in that Metropolitan Division. So it's always nice to see, some things not going the way that you'd expect and certain things being up there like you expect with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So it's a good early start here in the NHL season. We're a month in and I'm loving it.
And you say the Metropolitan Division, would you say that's the strongest division, or what would you say is kind of the heavy hitters in the NHL? Which division?
Yeah, so there's actually the new format here with the NHL. It used to have numerous divisions and so many, but now it's kind of just 4 massive divisions. And to answer your question, I would say actually that one is the most competitive division. Looking down the list, realistically, besides the New York Rangers, I could honestly tell you that any of those teams can compete for a top spot right now in that division. Of course, the Islanders, the Penguins, Capitals, Blue Jackets, Flyers, Hurricanes, Devils, and Rangers. That's in order of the standings. And you look at the Penguins and the Capitals, 2 teams that are going to be up there at the top of the list every single season with the stars that they have. But that's why I mentioned, Drew, the New York Islanders, a team that's right now 8-4, 45 goals for on the season. Of course, a new coach in Barry Trotz, who actually just won the Stanley Cup last year with the Washington Capitals, switched teams closer to home, and he's done a great job with them so far. So that's a jam-packed division, man. That's going to be very competitive all year long.
Yeah, a couple questions just off the top of my head here, looking at the standings. One is Washington, the defending Stanley Cup champions, sitting at 6-4 right now, 15 points. Is this like a where you thought they'd be, or is this a little Stanley Cup hangover? And does that happen, Stanley Cup hangovers in the NHL?
I think it does, and I think that we don't want to be too cliche about it and throw that word around, that phrase around, but I think specifically with this Capitals team, there's almost been so much pressure on them for the past several years to not only make the Stanley Cup Finals and win a cup, but just get past the first, second round of the playoffs. And I feel like when you start the season off, you want to have that goal and you want to have that motivation. And I'm not saying that motivation isn't there, but they finally achieved that. They finally achieved that landmark. Whereas certain teams, even like the Penguins, haven't been to that mark in several years now. And the New York Islanders, of course, have a very young team, and they haven't, seen a Stanley Cup Finals in a long, long time. So the motivation factor might be there, but it's also a slow start. I still like to see the Capitals team be, very, very competitive. And, you look at a team like Las Vegas, the Golden Knights, they're a team that was in Stanley Cup. Of course, they faced off against the Washington Capitals, Drew, and they're sitting second last in the Pacific Division. And to remind everybody, they were off to, I believe, I think something around like a 10-3, 10-4 start last year to their season, and they were at the top of the Pacific Division. So lots of change this year.
And last question here, McInnis, before we get into the games. We got the New York Rangers sitting at 6-7, the bottom of the Metropolitan Division. But if you look at their ATS, I'm guessing the puck line, they're 10-4. Is that something you bring into your handicap as far as I'm guessing the Rangers playing a lot of kind of close games here and maybe look to bet on them?
Definitely. I think with this Rangers team right now, I started the season off and I was really low on them. I really hated this team, Drew. I didn't think that they were anything special at all. I thought they had far too many young players, far too many new players to their system, and I didn't think there'd be any chemistry whatsoever. But I think, again, it's one of those things you got to think about where, when you're talking about the Capitals, the pressure's kind of off them, and there's that relief factor after winning the Cup last year. Well, this Rangers team, there wasn't really much pressure on them this year, but it was kind of their season to lose. I mean, everybody knew they had a kind of a weak roster this year. This is their year to rebuild and head into the draft next year and try to build a special team for the next few years. So, they're at the bottom of the division, but they're certainly competing in games. It's kind of been their defensive woes that have hurt them the most as they sit at that bottom of that division with 44 goals against. And I've mentioned this. Henrik Lundqvist is almost, in my eyes, one of the top goaltenders of this generation. But the reason why I say he's not that goalie anymore is because the defensemen around him aren't able to sweep the puck out of their end. They're not able to avoid the rebounds. And, when you're a goaltender, you're not going to be able to swallow up every single save. You're going to have rebounds, and you got to be able to count on your defenders to be able to and sweep the puck out of the way. So that's a great point, Drew. I mean, ATS is great, but, taking teams plus 1.5 oftentimes can be a lot of juice. Unless it's a massively favored game for the opposition. But it's a great point. The Rangers have been absolutely competing in teams, and I looked at them for a lot of plus money spots recently. I mean, they've been still plus 150, plus 160, plus 170 positions and taking teams down or competing in the game. So that's a great point, Drew.
Well, McInnis, let's get into these games. In the first game up, we got game number 53-54, Montreal, New York Rangers, the aforementioned Rangers we were just talking about. And actually looking at all the ATS records, the puck line records, these are two of the top teams. Montreal sitting at 9-5, New York Rangers sitting at 10-4 ATS. So if you're using the puck lines, these two have been very profitable. But either way, tonight's game, 7 Eastern, 53-54, Montreal at the New York Rangers. Looks like we got 5.5. The total, a little juice towards the under, and pretty much a pick 'em. We're seeing minus 113 at the Chris books, minus 110 pretty much everywhere else. How would you look to bet Montreal and New York here tonight?
Like you mentioned, these teams have both been great. ATS, Montreal 8-4-2, just straight up to start this season off. New York 6-7-1, but Montreal's been kind of a shocker really to start the year off. They've had some big wins as well. They're not just defeating bad teams and poor teams. They've actually been off to a decent start, taking on great teams like the Washington Capitals, like the Boston Bruins, and taking care of business. So it's been great to see so far from them. They've struggled with goal production all of the past couple of years, and realistically, they didn't really improve their roster too much, but they've adjusted their system. They've moved to being a faster team. Their shot number has skyrocketed up every single game, and that's really what's improved the most about this team is the team chemistry and almost their scoring depth. It's not just one or two guys anymore, Drew. It's almost like the entire lineup can find a way to put the puck in the back of the net. And have to mention it, I talk about it quite often with you and on several different media pages and on my Twitter account all the time, but Max Domi. This is a guy that scored 9 goals last year for the Arizona Coyotes. Everybody was absolutely mad. They were pissed off. They were mad that he got traded. They didn't think he'd produce whatsoever. Well, what do you know? I believe he has 8 goals already, Drew, on this season. And again, he had 9 goals all last season. He has 8 goals this season so far. He's off to an unreal start. He's on a line with Jonathan Drouin, another young guy that's a great player for that squad. So, look, coming into this one, this is one of those ones, Drew, where I'm going to take a look at this game and strictly it's a situational, but it's also kind of one of those stat games for me. It's one of those where I don't want to go against the stats. I mean, total has gone under in 5 of Montreal's last 7 games when playing New York, and 5 of the last 6 on the road against the New York Rangers, of course, playing at Madison Square Garden there. So I'm going to continue with this trend. We're going to see, we saw Niemi last night in nets for Montreal. Of course, Montreal on a second night of their back-to-back New York is well rested, so I think that means a good defensive game for them. And of course, we'll see Henrik Lundqvist between the pipes for the Rangers. So I'm going to look under the 5.5 in this one. This one, in my eyes, should get off to a relatively slow start, a slower start than both these two teams are used to seeing in my eyes. Should be a defensive battle style game, and that's what this Canadiens team has to prove to me and to everybody now, is that not only can they compete in high scoring games like last night against the Islanders, they can also compete and win in lower scoring games as well. So my plan on this one will be under 5.5.
All right, like in the under 5.5 in that one. Guys, we do have a coupon code for the podcast. It's McInnis half. That's Andrew McInnis' last name, McInnis, with the word half at the end, HALF. No spaces there. For half off anything to do with McInnis' all-access packages. That you could do 3-day, 7-day, 30-day, 90-day. All of those will be half off on the website using the coupon code McInnis half. Moving down the card here, McInnis, we got 55-56 Vegas Golden Knights versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. Looks like 5.5, little juice towards the over as far as the total goes. And the home Maple Leafs north of the border, -128 at Chris, seeing as high as -135 at Greek right now. How'd you look to bet the Golden Knights and Maple Leafs?
Yeah, Drew, I think we talked about this a little bit here in our opening little segment of the show, but this Vegas team, they've kind of had the hangover as well. And I think sometimes it's almost worse for the team that just is right there, almost about to win, and then they fall short, and it's almost that disappointment factor. You come into the next season and you realize how hard it really is to get to that Stanley Cup point and that Stanley Cup Finals, and you can take a deep breath and you look back and realize, when's the next time I'm really going to get there, because we all know how hard it is to get there. So this team struggled. They're 6-7-1, which is not terrible, but a decent record. But they've struggled with goal production. I mean, this is a team that before, I think, Drew, nobody really knew who their all-stars were, like Jonathan Marchessault and guys like that. Of course, they have Max Pacioretty now in the lineup, a guy that hopefully can bump that goal production up for them. But nobody really knew who their stars were, and I think it benefited for them. I think it was kind of like, you came into every game, and it was a mysterious factor because this Vegas team was in their inaugural season and nobody knew much about them. Now we kind of do know some about them. And what we're finding out is that they are a lot more heavily reliant on Marc-Andre Fleury, the goaltender, than we really expected them to be. And I think he has to stand on his head every night for them to really pull off a win. This Vegas team, it's plain and simple for me. This is another game where, I'll get to Toronto in a second, but you can't argue with stats sometimes, Drew. And I don't like to go against them all the time. Sometimes I'll have my own opinions, but Vegas 1-5 straight up in their last 6 games on the road. And I would have probably predicted something around that ballpark before I even looked at that stat, because they're a team, first of all, I mean, if anyone's seen a game live or watched a game on TV in Vegas, that arena is sold out every night. They're loud. They're a different species of hockey fans. It's great to see that Vegas and Nevada has adopted the game that we all love, but it's a great crowd, it's a great atmosphere, and this team seems comfortable there. They play with a lot more pace, with a lot more comfortability. They can fire a lot more shots on net when they are at home, but on the road, they've struggled. They've struggled big time, and the Leafs have actually played a lot better on the road as well, but they are hosting this game, and they're still a team that is strong. They're a strong team, averaging just around 3.45 goals per game, and I can tell you, when they get hopefully Nylander back after he signs his contract he's currently holding out, and when they get Austin Matthews back from injury, I can tell you they'll be averaging around 4 goals per game, which is unheard of in the NHL nowadays. So looking at this one, Drew, this one's plain and simple to me. This is a perfect little spot here for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They struggled when Austin Matthews, their star player, talked about to be one of the best players in the whole league. When he got down injured and he was banged up, they announced him out for several weeks. They were -155 favorites. They lost 3-1 to Calgary. And again, they're -150 favorites. They lost 2-1 to Dallas. But what do you know? November 3rd, a couple days ago, they come back 5-0 dominant win over the Pittsburgh Penguins as +120 underdogs this time. So maybe all it took was an underdog spot and for them to face a really good team in the Pittsburgh Penguins for them to step things up. But we're going to take a look here at the regulation line. If you have it, look at your book. Take a look at the three-way line, the win-draw-win line, whatever you want to call it, +125. Why pay the $1.30 when you can get plus money here with plus 125, which means the Maple Leafs to win the game without it going to overtime. And I'm definitely willing to pay that price to get the plus 125 on the Maple Leafs in regulation.
All right, good stuff, McInnis. Moving down the card, we got 2 games left. We got 57-58 New Jersey at Ottawa. Looks like the Devils, the road favorite here, laying about minus 130, seeing some minus 135s out there with a total of 6 in this one in Ottawa.
Drew, I'm not sure if you've heard about this story, but I think it's noteworthy, and it's worthy to mention here. The Ottawa Senators were in Arizona, and they were in an Uber. There, of course, everyone knows what Uber is. They were driving. There was pretty much 4 or 5 of their best players and the most talked about players all in a car together. The Uber driver recorded them, had the webcam, had the audio recording, and pretty much every single player, including their best player in my eyes, Matt Duchene, completely ripped on their own team. He literally got caught on camera, on an audio recorder, completely bashing his assistant coach, saying that they haven't learned a thing in weeks. He hasn't listened in a week. He doesn't understand why they have meetings. They don't change anything. He doesn't learn anything when he goes to practice. These are professional players in an Uber on the road completely bashing their team. They literally said, quote for quote, "Our coach is about to be the first coach in NHL history to have the worst penalty kill and the worst power play." And it's unexcusable. I mean, this is one of those things where, in my eyes, first of all, it's sickening that this Uber driver would invade their privacy like that and actually send that out and, of course, probably sell it to a media outlet or something like that. But secondly, this team, it just, for all the things that have happened to them over the past year and a half to 2 years, this tops it all off. This is one of the worst things that could possibly happen to a locker room, to a team, to chemistry, for a coach-player relationship. It's unheard of. It's unacceptable. This is like huge news right now in the hockey world. And, you know, the players have issued an apology. The coaches have addressed it. They said they're no longer going to address the media about it. But it's unheard of, and it shouldn't happen. This Ottawa team is an absolute mess. Unfortunately, I'm going to see them in 2 weeks, and I'm not even looking forward to seeing them anymore because of all this happening. But on the other side of things, New Jersey, they're a team that, you know, we can talk positively about. We can actually talk a little bit more about them from an exciting standpoint. They're a team that's come along. They're a team that, I mentioned this a couple minutes ago to you. They're a team that's at the, you know, near the bottom of their division. And if you ask me and you put me on the hot seat, Drew, before this season, where I think they'd be in a month, it definitely wouldn't be 6-5-1. That's for sure. And I think it also has to do with their tough road trip that they started things out on. But, you know, they've been competing in a lot of games. They're averaging around 3.25 goals per game, and Ottawa 3.2 as well. So they're up there scoring goals. Their defense is just absolutely terrible. And, you know, another thing that the players mentioned in that Uber ride was their goaltender, Craig Anderson, a guy that everyone loves. And you know what they were saying, Drew, is that they feel bad for him. They literally said, got to feel bad for Craig. Eh? You know, he's a guy that we all love, and he's a great goaltender. And, you know, our coaches hang him out to dry. You know, we're producing these systems that we run and our defenders. It's sad. This team is an absolute disgrace to the NHL right now. They're falling apart. And, you know, this game will go over the total of 6. I mean, if I could get an alternate of 6.5 or 7, this game will go over the total. The New Jersey Devils are clicking right now. They're finally pretty healthy. You know, they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins 5-1 as plus 150 underdogs. That's very impressive. And, you know, they've been struggling to wrap up some consistency. But to me, that game really sparks them up here. Their lineup will get going and stay consistent. And Ottawa is just absolutely going downhill. New Jersey, the over has hit 9 of the last 13 games on the road. And I think it continues tonight. Ottawa has been great scoring early in games. I'd also take a look at the first period over 1.5. It's something I've looked at. We'll talk about later on, hopefully, in this podcast. But this game's an absolute mess, Drew, to say the least. And I hope I've gotten that point across. And I'll definitely take the over in this one.
All right, McInnis, a couple questions, man, because this stuff is real interesting. And I think if you can get on it kind of before the market does, you can make some money. But, yeah, one, if you type into YouTube Senators Uber video, you can see it here. They're all in the Uber. I guess my first question is this illegal? You said it was in Arizona. I mean, can you film people and then put it out without them knowing?
That's what's funny. I mean, I've been trying to look at that myself. I mean, I'm no expert in that stuff as well, but I think that it was in Arizona, and from what I've seen, I think in Arizona it is legal, but I think in Ottawa it wouldn't have been. if that makes any sense. So I think it's like, they're on the road, and of course, where they were, they have to abide by those laws. But yeah, I mean, that's just ridiculous. I think the players, when they spoke about what happened, they almost said, our privacy got invaded. Like, we didn't give permission for that stuff to get out there. But if you watch the video, it's kind of hard to watch. It's very cringeworthy. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that, everyone talks about their work and their boss or whatever. But I mean, these guys were straight up bashing on their entire hockey team. And, not to mention just any guys. I mean, pretty much the best players on the team, Drew, were in the cab together, including who I'm most disappointed in, Thomas Chabot, a player that I actually did a lot of media work around his team and the league he played in here in Nova Scotia. He's a player that's a prospect, only pretty much his second year in the league, and he's caught on tape smack talking the team as well. Not a good look for a young player.
Also, another thing to think about, when did this happen? I mean, it just got released, 17 hours ago, but when were they actually saying this? Do you know?
I think 2 nights ago.
Oh, okay, so it is recent.
I think a few nights ago. Yeah, it's relatively recent here, but I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things, man, where you got to wonder and you got to think. I mean, though they were in Arizona to end in October 30th, so you got to wonder, really, it's probably after that game, I think. So maybe
within
5 days ago.
And they were in an Uber because they were drinking? Or hell, was it before the game? Or these guys partying before games?
They lost 5-1. So who knows? Maybe they were drinking. Who knows?
Oh, man. All right, good stuff. So something to look into if you're out there. Also hit us up on Twitter if you know the laws. That would be interesting. Any lawyers out there, anything. If you're allowed to be filmed, hit McInnis up on Twitter at McInnis Picks, or myself at Drew Martin Bets, or at Sportsmemo. Just the @ symbol and Sportsmemo. We'd love to hear really what the legal ramifications of this are. But let's move down the card. Give some of the late night watchers a game here. We got 65-66. The game numbers 10:35 Eastern. Drop of the puck, I guess you could say, in the NHL. 5.5 the total, -150 across the board right now. San Jose, the big favorite at home.
Yeah, San Jose, the big favorite at home, Drew. I'm really happy you kind of teed me up like that, because they shouldn't be. they flat out shouldn't be -150 favorites, and in these massive numbers that they're getting, it's ridiculous. They're 7-4 to start the season off, 3 overtime losses, but they have very much so underperformed. They've been a team that have been squeaking out victories, and they're a team that should not be doing so whatsoever. They've got guys like Pavelski, Kane, Thornton, even Meyer, guys that are outstanding offensive weapons that have not been there on a nightly basis. I'll keep things pretty short with this one. I mean, this is a San Jose team that's averaging, close to 3.2, 3.3 goals per game, but the consistency level hasn't been there. I mean, one game they're getting 1 goal on the board, one game they're getting 6. I mean, I look for consistency when I'm backing teams. I'm staying far away from San Jose from a side perspective. I always talk with you about how, no matter how much you get into this and how close you follow the league, it's good to still be a student of the game and learn from mistakes and learn from what you've seen. And I've learned with this San Jose team, even though I've cashed some tickets on them, I can't be trusting them on puck lines or on heavy favorites. It's just not that kind of thing. And with Minnesota, they're a team right now where, they're 7-1 straight up in their last 8 games. They're a team that, is better at home than on the road, but they've been putting up goals. I've classified them for many years, Drew, as an under team. But recently, they put up 5 goals in a victory over the Blues. They put up 4 goals in victory over the Oilers. They put up 5 goals in a victory over the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, they're a team that can score. They've proved to us they mean business, and total's gone over in 4 of Minnesota's last 5 games when on the road in San Jose. So, the stats are there to back things up, and my thoughts are really with the over in this one. Of course, it's 5.5. We see a lot of 6s these days. This number should go over the total, and another play I'm going to look at for this one specifically is going to be the over 1.5 goals for the first period. And noteworthy, last night we saw every single game go over in the first period. So that's something new to look at as far as different prop bets and situational bets.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And every game last night went over, McInnis?
Every game in the first period went over.
Interesting, man. Well, how do you approach NHL props or period betting in general in the NHL?
This year, I've really changed my thoughts with it. I think that it's almost become, not as much of a rarity. I guess it's become more of a common thing, and something that can be an official play, can be a best bet even, which is ridiculous. It's hard to even fathom. I mean, you told me this 2 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you, but you have 20 minutes to cap, pretty much. You're capping a period. You're not handicapping. You could be handicapping two teams, but realistically, you're capping how teams come out to the start. For example, the Ottawa Senators, a team that struggles to close games out, but they've been up 1, 2, 3-0 numerous times in the first period in games and still lost that game. And a lot of times, like 2 nights ago, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Ottawa Senators faced off, and Drew, the first period over hit, but the full game over did not. So I think sometimes it's important to say, hey, look, is this game going to get off to a good start and a big jump, or is it going to get off to a slow start and maybe pick things up as the periods move on? Now, it's good to remember that the first period is really where the best odds are that you can grab as far as these overs go, because once you get into the second and third period, it's almost minus 160, 170, 180 some spots, especially for the third period, which usually makes sense. But I mean, first period overs, like I mentioned last night, 5 for 5. You can't argue with it. Sometimes, I've had some people that I know that if they're betting on a full game over, they're also betting the first period over, which isn't a bad idea in my eyes. But I think, certain games, like for example, Columbus Blue Jackets, I believe the streak was 10-1, Drew. They were on a 9-0 streak at one point for first period overs. And that's not something that you'd really hear ever, because, of course, it takes two teams to hit that, and it's not something you can do on your own. But, that streak finally ended, and then right away they're back on it again. But this San Jose team is also one of those teams on a massive streak as well. I believe it's around 9-1, 9-2, something like that as well, in that ballpark. Don't quote me on that, but in that ballpark. So they're a team that's also allowing goals early, but getting off to a hot start. So it's important to look at that. And, if you like to get into the props, I don't want to recommend this too much, but if you like to get into it, look at, the highest scoring period. You can get that stuff on Bet365, 5 Dimes, Sports Interaction here in Canada, a lot of different ones like that. I look at those quite a bit. If you think a game's going to get off to a slower start, look at that, period bets or third period bets. A lot of times it's paying some great plus money. And also, if you like a team in a game, but they're paying far too much juice, for the full game, look at that first period. If you think this team will dominate, you should probably also think they'll get off to a great start. Look at that first period, minus 0.5, and you should get some better odds than that as well.
Good stuff, McInnis. We got the coupon code McInnis half when you're checking out for half off any all-access package with Andrew McInnis. That can be 3-day, 7-day, 30-day, or 90-day. All of that, it would include NHL, CFL, NFL as well. But McInnis, you've been 2-1 on the best bets since we started this on the podcast. I've been betting them live. I got my BetOnline account up right now. Where should I click? NHL, NHL 3-way, Grand Salami, Europe, Sweden. That's what I'm seeing under hockey. But have at it, man. Where are we going with the best bet for this week?
You know what? We cashed one that was a decent, little plus money there. We cashed, some regulation line bet last week, and I really like this one here. Anytime I can get the least at plus money, Drew, it makes me excited. It makes me get up in the morning and get excited for these games. So Toronto, regulation line plus 125, coming off a game where they absolutely slapped the Pittsburgh Penguins 5-0. That carries some momentum into this game in my eyes, and they'll have an excellent performance as well. It's a road spot here for the Vegas Golden Knights. And if you've been listening at all and paying attention, not just looking around in space when Drew and I are doing these podcasts, you know that I've mentioned teams are a lot better in my eyes in the later half of a road trip than the first half. And, Vegas flying all the way to Toronto playing at home in front of their massive crowd. They'll be here to put a good performance on for their crowd. And, regulation line plus 125. Gotta love it.
All right, good stuff. So we got at least in my book, it's 1058 is the game number. Toronto Maple Leafs plus 120 right now at BetOnline. So, yeah, man, good stuff. We got putting the bet in right now, man. Hopefully we make it 3-1 on the best bets. Anything else you want to throw out before we shut this podcast down?
Yeah, just a little the second shout out. Of course, I mentioned, it is CFL playoff time. It's something that I cap and follow very, very closely here in Canada. And, it's something that's not talked about enough, but it's a great league, a very competitive league, and also a very niche market to make some money and to profit in. So I'm going to have a playoff package up on the Sportsmemo website tonight. Of course, this is being recorded on Tuesday, and the games are Sunday. The division semifinals are this coming Sunday, and I'm going to have some plays ready to go and prepared. And of course, last year hit it right on the head of the nail with the Grey Cup champions. So I hope to do that once more this year, and also give out some futures possibly as well. So stay tuned for that. Check out my CFL stuff moving forward.
All right, good stuff, McInnis. We got $2 Tuesday up right now. Teddy Covers is the featured handicapper at sportsmemo.com, so check it out on the website. Also, McInnis in with some NHL. And remember the coupon code McInnis half when checking out of anything McInnis stuff, all access. So, guys, we'll be back tomorrow with Robbie Vino on for the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast. Thanks for tuning in.